Yeah. You know how we seek that higher knowledge. Only the ignorant can't relate. We just kill them with love instead of hate. That's what it's about.
We are Moors.
Shout out to the Grand Sheikh, Cujo L, Iron Sheikh.
We are Moors. Heard what I said? Circle 7 snap back, not just affairs. We are Moors. You heard what I said? Blue, white, green flags, not just red. We are Moors. Heard what I said? Keep talking reckless and the Muhtadi's for your head.
There's a lot more. So we were watching some of Malik Zulu Shabazz meets Moorish World TV. So because of the treason, I figured I will just do it this way instead of using the video and chopping it up like how we do, because people like to tell on the oppressor, or tell to the oppressor on their brother and all that. So one statement that was made by Blue Cup, one statement made by Blue Cup was MSTA's purpose is to bring us into nationhood with a step-by-step method, which they claim that they have, that step-by-step method, but it's not gonna be televised, right? He's talking about how the step-by-step method that they have is not going to be televised on social media or whatever, but ultimately it's the uniting of all Asiatics. But he made a statement that it doesn't matter what you call yourself when we deal with this idea of uniting of all the Asiatics. What do you think about his statement saying that?
We all know, first of all, that he just went totally against what the Prophet's foundations was. The Prophet said, first of all, we're supposed to be doing the upliftment of fallen humanity. He's not saying that was what the foundation of the movement is. That's the foundation of the movement. Then he's saying it doesn't matter what you call yourself. That's how. We already know that's the whole thing. Prophet said if you don't do anything else, declare your nationality. But he's saying, which means to be clear of who you are. So you better know what you call yourself. So that's totally opposite of what the Prophet's teaching. Because you're supposed to be clear of who you are. Declare your nationality. He said it doesn't matter what you call yourself. So you can go up here and call yourself Negro colored black guy, and it doesn't matter. But then again, we also know he still doesn't. He's just committing treason. We can't even chop up the video because we already know how our brother's going to do it. It's just a long list of things that he does. But for him to say it doesn't matter what you call yourself, that's like right there. Your own brother putting you back into slavery. Right there. It's proof right there. If it doesn't matter what you call yourself, he just put you back into slavery. He just said, oh, it doesn't matter if you honor your ancestors. It doesn't matter. Because when you say it doesn't matter what you call yourself, that's what you're saying. It's deeper than just what he just makes it seem.
Right,
go
no.
back to chattel property.
And then another thing too, that when he was talking about the purpose of the MSTA is to bring us into nationhood. Well, if you're talking nationhood, you're talking nationality, which it matters what you call yourself. You know what I mean? Like, if you're saying nationhood, then the people of that nation would be identified based on that nation or that state. Like, that's how they'll be identified. They would have to be identified by that nation or that state if you're talking about nationhood. Now, if you're talking about clubs and organizations and all these different people of color getting together under one banner, then yeah, it doesn't matter what you call yourself. You know, in that case, for sure, it doesn't matter what you call yourself. So, are these Moors playing that game? You think of, you know, like just trying to fleece whoever they can? Because one of the emphatic points that Noble Drew Ali made is that we're not Negro black colored. And if we're not Negro black colored, then we shouldn't be affiliating with people who consider themselves that on, you know, national affairs. You know, like why would you bring someone who's not part of your nation to talk on behalf of your nation? You know? He also made the statement that Malik Zulu Shabazz is an attorney, so rogue Moors, meaning, you know, Moors like us, right, active Moors, 720 allodial-minded Moors, should get with Malik Zulu Shabazz so we could learn about law, since he's an attorney and he knows law, so we should get with him. What do you think about that?
We already know what an attorney is. Attorney, which means to turn over to, works for the state, works for the colonizer. He works for the colonizer, like you said, 720 Moors, allodial Moors. We know these things, but again, our brother Blue Cup, sitting there with his fez on, is going to tell you the total opposite.
No, this is interesting too, because Malik Zulu Shabazz did say that the fact that he is a lawyer, he understands that he's part of a European controlled system. Right? And the fact that he's coming on a Moor's channel would imply, obviously, he's open to learning. But you could only learn from those who have something to teach. Especially with regard to where he's going, because clearly he's looking for direction with regard to law, even though he's a lawyer or an attorney.
The attorney guy is telling you he works for the colonizer.
Right.
But our brother is telling you go work. Oh, Moors need to go side with the attorney.
With the attorney.
Well, and then he turns around and admits, well, I work for the colonizer.
Right.
So now how does that work? How does that work? How does that work? How does that make him look?
Exactly. If the person, if the individual that these Moriscos are sending active Moors to is telling you, well, I work for the European system. You know, I don't work for Asiatic anything. Like, I work for the European system. So, you know, I'm not taking this as it's something legitimate. Like, I'm just part of it because it'll help me, you know, get my people a little further. But he's not boosting that system.
That's why he came to a Moorish platform. He's thinking he's on a true platform.
Right, that's what he's thinking. Yeah, he's
I'm
thinking.
gonna see what the Moors are talking about.
Right.
Because you know, he starts talking about, sovereignty. It needs to be cleaned up a little bit, but he starts bringing that up because he's thinking that if I'm on the Moorish channel, they, of course, they're gonna come on and correct everything and speak the jour, but he went on the wrong Moorish channel because he went on the channel because the brother wants to be part of the colonizers. He's even saying, we get 8 people into the government and we can control the city. Like,
Right.
what is he talking about?
Why, from your perspective, like, what makes that not be the way for Moors to go as far as this aspect of unity or exercising our political power? Because they're going to make reference to Noble Drew Ali in the 20s making Moors vote. So Moors today shouldn't have a problem with taking over the cities and putting their own Moors in there so we could run the city.
Okay. Now, in the video, he speaks about him knowing the prophet very well when he set up in the 20s. It's always what the prophet set up in the 20s. Nobody wants to never speak about what the prophet set up with the old Canaanite temple in 1913. What happened in those 7 years before the 20s even hit? When it was set up as to be, lawfully taught, when it was, based off civics. But nobody never wants to speak about that. Like and then come up to the 20s when all the Moors went and had voted for I forgot the brother's title.
Oscar the Priest.
Yeah, for Oscar the Priest to get in. But that, to me, when you do see it, it was a good thing for the Moors to get together and show their power. But then again, it was just the times, because you got to correct me if I'm wrong, though. Wasn't it just like the times was just different? The times was different. It was more of a de jure base.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Right. That's why Drew Ali, filed things in Cook County and all that, opposed to going to the city of Chicago to go file something.
Yep. You went to the county.
You went to the county recorder.
Yep.
Because you were dealing with.
Check the record now. All the counties are abandoned.
Right. So even though the word vote implies governmental activity in these two different generations, in one generation you're saying vote was with dealing with something de jure, whereas today these Moors talking about voting, they're talking about voting into something that's de facto. Which is two different jurisdictions, and the de facto jurisdiction is one that Moors should not be part of in that sense, because they're really supposed to be the de jure ones. The Moors aren't supposed to be the de facto ones. They're supposed to be the ones that are putting things right.
Mm-hmm. And like the brother Shabazz said, who works for who he was talking about getting the whole thing with the voting now to being part of that system. He's part of the brother Shabazz said he's part of that system.
Right.
Being part of that system, I work for the colonizer.
Yep. Now
but he's talking about sovereignty.
Yeah.
How he wants to be separate. We're gonna have our own thing as Asiatics. You know what I mean? That's the verbiage he was using.
Yeah.
But the brother's still just pushing, we need to side with the colonizer. It's just amazing to watch it too, because you can see, like I said, you can see Shabazz came on there to get help from the Moors. Like, okay,
Right, yeah. He made the statement that they were talking about seeing based on the unity, right? That looking beneath the labels, Black Power or more or whatever, and just looking at each other as brothers, right? And then putting the heart before the label, right? And what you're talking about, he was saying that when he saw Moors in their fezzes and their suits and stuff like that, he had a certain respect for that because he saw that in the nation. And then he also knew that, well, it only makes sense because majority of the things that the nation had, they got it from people who were before them. Right? No. On that note of unity with our collective melanated family, the brother brought up a few times self-determination. You had a reference with regard to self-determination. We could put that out too with regard to this part. I love that Moors are teaching sovereignty, which is independence, not under colonial rule, for self-determination, right? And Moorish World TV at this point is starting to make the attorney have this mindset that, well, you can't really say sovereignty because, and then they go into their whole ADL, SPLC mindset of Moors being tied to sovereign citizens and whatever, right? With him bringing this up, this idea of sovereignty, and them going in that direction, opposed to going with what he's saying, as far as sovereignty really being, our people coming into fending for themselves, right? Not under the colonial control. But it seems like these Moors want to be under colonial control. Because every time we bring up sovereignty, they're trying to tie us to some type of sovereign citizens. The European founded a concept of sovereignty. So just to address the whole idea of unity with our people and sovereignty and the concept of self-determination.
Okay. When the brother's saying that we need to be, first of all, the brother Shabazz, when he's saying, like you said, the sovereignty has to be underneath our own. But the brother Blue Cup saying us being part of the colonization, when he's speaking of the United States, he wants to be part of the United States. I got a book called The Jurisprudence, Text, and Readings on the Philosophy of Law, third edition, from George C. Christie and Patrick H. Martin.
Just put that out one more time.
Jurisprudence, Text, and Readings on the Philosophy of Law, third edition, from George C. Christie and Patrick H. Martin, American Casebook Series. In the introduction, chapter 1, about the comments on jurisprudence, it speaks about law's existence. It says, consider the United States. It exists, and yet it does not. A mass of land exists that is part bounded by natural features, the Atlantic Ocean, the Pacific, the Gulf of Mexico. But when the United States appears on a map with lines drawn to separate the U.S. from Mexico or Canada, those lines are political creations, not descriptions of real characteristics of land itself. When we speak of the United States, or New York, or Texas, or General Motors, we are speaking of a legal entity, one that has existence only because we agree that it the United States or General Motors did not exist, then it would cease to exist. Just as the Soviet Union ceased to exist. So what they're saying right then and there, that's what the brother wants you to coincide with. Someone he wants you to coincide with General Motors. That's the law book. Jurisprudence, textual readings on the philosophy of law. Speaks about, and that's their own stuff. That's their stuff.
Yeah.
The European, that's their stuff. They're telling you.
No.
General Motors. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, because again, with regard to that idea of the sovereignty, Malik Zulu Shabazz was saying that sovereignty is a quest for self-determination based in land, right? Like sovereignty is based in this idea of land, and then in order to be on the land, that has to be based on treaties that, you know, ancient foremothers and forefathers have done. You know, and he went into, you know, treaties between Spain and the United States or whatever, which we know it's really treaties between Morocco, right? Not treaties with the people who conquered the Moors, right? He was saying that the concept of self-determination, that he learned it from Brother Malcolm X, and he's looking at it being a conversion of all for this concept of sovereignty, which they know this thing exists. They know that there's a thing called sovereignty that so-called our people are tied to. They just can't see how to tie themselves to it. You know?
The brother's telling him to you can see his position. He's coming basically looking for help.
Right. You know, he's coming for help. He's coming for help so much that he even brought up brother Ansar with the American Institute of Human Rights, that he's working with them. So if the attorney is not working with the statute people or the ordinance people or the acts people, he's not working with them. He's working with the rights people. Remember, he came out of Nation of Islam, New Black Panther Party, and all of that. Where is he now? Human rights. What did Malcolm do? Malcolm came from pimp to jailbird to NOI to where? Human rights. Where is he at right now? Same place where Malcolm was. Right? They keep bringing up Khalid. Same thing. Where did he start off? NOI. By the end of his time, he was where it was supposed to be from the start. That we're Moors, we're Asiatics, we're not black men and all that stuff, we're not African, because Africa's not our home. That's just our throne. You're not your throne. So don't tell me about your African. You're not your throne. Your throne doesn't have the status to make you somebody. So you can't claim that. Right? And again, he brought up the fact that he is an attorney. But he knows that that's part of the European control system and would not allow us to have sovereignty. Which is why he's going toward we have to be self-determined. Because as an attorney, I'm part of the European structure. So I know that these people aren't going to let us exercise some sovereignty. So we better go, telling you. But what these Moors doing? These Moors are bringing officers of the court on their platform to try to tell you that status correction doesn't work. And that you're not sovereign. And that you can't even exercise this thing called sovereignty because that's some European creation. Right? And then they keep bringing up this timeline of, well, the infiltration of Europeans into this concept of the Moors who have this mindset. Well, it's from the 90s when this happened. This happened in the 90s when the Moors were, allowing Europeans to come teach them stuff about sovereignty. That's BS. Because there was Moors in the 80s that were teaching this info. Before some European sovereign whatever stuff that was even around, there were Moors teaching this info. Moorish Americans were having classes in the 80s. And again, this thing of, because remember, they know that Dr. Umar is against the structure in the sense of, our people's liberation. It shouldn't be done through the European having any involvement, right? So you have somebody like Ishmael Bey on there, and he's playing on those things to get Malik Zulu Shabazz to have this idea of a different perspective of sovereignty. But he's a attorney, so he has a law dictionary, and all he's got to do is go look it up in the law dictionary. He doesn't need somebody's interpretation of what sovereignty is, which is why he can talk so strong about it right now. Go watch the whole thing. All he's talking about is sovereignty. And what? These Moors have nothing to say about him saying sovereignty, but let Taj Tariq Bey say sovereignty. Let Kudro say sovereignty. Let RV Bay Publications mention sovereignty. Oh, all of a sudden it's sovereign citizen, European, whatever.
But the person that works for them inside with them is trying to run out and come like, yo, the sovereign stuff. We need to be talking about that.
Yeah, right. He wants to be sovereign.
Help.
Yeah. Help. Right.
Help. And these brothers is like, oh, no, that's all right. You all right. You can swim. You can swim.
Okay, you could probably address this too. Since we're talking about the sovereignty, they were bringing up, Tarek was bringing up, the reason why there's a division in the Moorish paradigm is because there's those Moors that think that they can separate or divide themselves from the government, meaning U.S. And then most Moors in the temple believe that you can take the system back or you could bend it to your will, and you don't want to fight the power, you want to be the power. And how you be the power is, voting and having your 8 people in, districts or whatever like that as whatever councilmen so that you can have some political power. Clearly that's not sovereignty. Clearly that's not self-determination. Clearly that's you go get a tune-up on the car at Jiffy Lube, and now you're a Jiffy Lube citizen. And then you're thinking that, oh yeah, because I have a receipt for Jiffy Lube, I'm a citizen of Jiffy Lube.
Why every other nation got something set up here but us? They still want us to be part of somebody else's Jiffy Lube.
Right.
We got Chinatowns everywhere. Every other nation got their own stuff. But when we talk about we want our own stuff as Moorish Americans, we can't do that. We gotta be part of Jiffy Lube. General Motors.
Now another point too is he made a statement because they brought up the BIE, right? And Malik Zulu Shabazz made the statement about he was surprised that when he read the BIE that all it talked about in there was Moors. Right? And that, you know, if that he had to give the Moors a round of applause. Because if you're making an FBI list, that means you have to be doing something. You're obviously not a passive pansy. You're obviously for the liberation of your people if the FBI is watching you. Right? Now, the reason why we bring that up is because he's a been on the list individual because he knows about putting in work. So we want to take people back to 2007. And this is the article. This is the article I wrote when we had our black newsletter, our black newsletter called Knowledge Press. Right? Knowledge Press, publishing independent thoughts from the black community for the black community. Right? And this article was entitled, "It may not be good news to them, but it sure is good news to us." Oh yeah, More, if you could just mute.
Oh, okay, my phone, sorry.
No, it's all good. On May 15, 2007, a Toronto-based group called the New Black Youth Taking Action scheduled a rally to fight the criminalization and incarceration of youth with high concentrations of skin melanin. This criminalization is due to and most recently exercised by the Canadian government through the Safe Schools Act. The new BYTA is a group that also frontlined the Caribana boycott in 2006. Though this group is working to help our youth become mindful that what is going on around them is negatively affecting them, the group still, and unfortunately, will be viewed as a troublesome group of black separatists, which is eons from the truth. John Turley Ewart, the National Post deputy comment editor, said, "If the BYTA wants to stop young black men from killing each other, they have advocated a strong means to that end. Promoting Mr. Shabazz's socially poisonous ideas, and in the case of the BYTA, dismissed the legitimate concerns of the B'nai B'rith while advocating a segregationist agenda, is a recipe for fostering divisiveness that run counter to the ideals and the realities of the Canadian way of life." For a week before the rally, the media outlets of Toronto were beginning the barrage and assault on the prominent African lawyer Malik Zulu Shabazz due to his direct involvement with the new Black Panther Party and his views through his studies under Minister Khalid Abdul Mohammed and Minister Louis Farrakhan, who themselves have been targets for the ADL and B'nai B'rith. Malik Zulu Shabazz was scheduled to speak at a rally to peacefully address the mobilization of black youth in Toronto, united to fight the Safe Schools Act. Though the group was promoted that this will be a peaceful event, which it was since I was in attendance to witness it myself, the remarks made about our brilliant brother lawyer and organizer were such to allow the hatred for blacks against each other, which is the Willie Lynch letter, to be perpetuated. The detention and refusal of admittance to Canada by the Canada Border Services Agency of the brother, who has the ability and charisma to give guidance to a disenfranchised community, was highly because of his record of being anti-Semitic, anti-police, and being troublesome, quote unquote. The last quoted comments were made by Ontario Community Safety Minister Monte Quinter. If blacks would read and study, they too would see the truth behind the lies being told on our Millennium Prophet. Mr. Monte Quinter was the founding president of the Toronto Council of B'nai B'rith. B'nai B'rith claims to be Canada's leading Jewish advocacy organization, but advocacy is only part of what they do. Sadly, they appear to have walked down the road of supporting and aiding terrorism. They are assisting lawlessness in society, and instead of intellectually defeating their detractors, they opt to work closely and support people who would kill other political opponents. B'nai B'rith, whose name in Hebrew means Brotherhood of the Covenant, was founded over 150 years ago and is primarily a political and social advocacy organization for Jewish people and causes around the world. B'nai B'rith is a network of members in 55 nations around the world. The organization claims providing us with an unparalleled ability to monitor and shape events. Those last two words, shape events, are indeed, as shall be seen, an apt description of the consummate abilities of B'nai B'rith and the Anti-Defamation League. The fact that Malik Zulu Shabazz is labeled an anti-Semite is amazingly idiotic. A Semite is a descendant of Shem, a member of any of the various ancient and modern peoples originating in southwestern Asia, including Akkadians, Canaanites, Phoenicians, Hebrews, original Jews, and Arabs, Moors. Through study, we find out that the ancient Canaanites, Hebrews, Arabs, Asians, and Akkadians were people with high concentrations of skin melanin, or black people. So for a black person, namely Malik Zulu Shabazz, to be labeled by Ashkenazi Jew organizations as anti-Semite, when it's very obvious through him carrying on the legacy of the Black Panther Party as the NBPP that he is totally in favor of black people being liberated, is a lie perpetuated to discourage and degrade our struggle, which has been cornered as a sympathy market by the fake hook-nosed Jew from the hills and caves of Europe. Historian Sheikh Anta Diop also points out that the Semitic arises in the 4th millennia BC from crossbreeding between black inhabitants of the Holy Land and white northern invaders. The European Khazars became Jews in 740 AD. Neither group is descended from the house of Israel. Khazars make up over 90% of the so-called Jews, the world's best kept secret. Hewley writes, these groups, Khazars especially, plus Edomites and other ethnic groups, make up modern Jewry today. Although the black Hebrew Israelites are the descendants of the ancient Israel, this truth is not known by many, and it's the world's best kept secret. Khazar Jews were a heavy part of the African slave trade in America. Compiled from Jewish documents, the secret relationship between the blacks and the Jews by the Nation of Islam reveals the vast Jewish involvement in the African slave trade. Jews were also major slave sellers during the Middle Ages. Van Sertima, African Presence in Early Europe, page 161. These Jewish slave sellers were probably not real Jews at all, but Khazars, the hated white Khazars who have usurped the real Jews. Historians are now recognizing that the majority of the Eastern so-called Jews are actually Khazars and have no Semitic root whatsoever. The Khazars are imposters. Well-suppressed knowledge is emerging about their warlike tribe of whites that rose to power in Eastern Europe and were hated by the other whites they conquered due to their severe exploitative treatment of them. The Khazars all converted to Judaism as a political ploy during the Middle Ages. It appears that they learned all they could from the real Hebrews before usurping them, selling them into slavery, or killing them, and taking over their place using the corrupted form of Judaism to hide behind while continuing their treachery right into modern times. Much of Europe's historical hate for Jews is hate for the ruthless Khazars who continued to be hated in spite of becoming Jews. In fact, the word Jew originated during the 1700s to label them. Khazars by G.C. Hatton exposes that the Khazars are the real anti-Semites who have labeled themselves as Zionists and Jews to deceive the world in furthering their own plans for global and political conquest, blacked out through whitewashed Suzar. The other thing to make note of is that the dictionary does not describe the anti-Semite of hating all Semitic people, just the Jews. Miss Anizor, responding to B'nai B'rith's criticism of Mr. Shabazz's dubious comment on Jews by saying, The idea that black people must seek approval from the Jewish or any other community when addressing our own issues reflects just how deep the roots of white supremacy and systemic racism run in Canada. We want to gratefully thank the new BYTA for taking action successfully against the systematic tactics covertly used by the Government of Canada to criminalize our brilliant, courageous, magnificent, illustrious, gifted, indigenous, talented, prolific, responsible, caring, loving, loved, appreciated, honorable, highly melanated youth. Do not allow the obstacles to hinder our progress. Continue to support our young comrades doing monumentous work to build our communities. So that was 2007, right? So, Brother Shabazz, he's been under these people's radar. He's been under surveillance by FBI, CIA, ADL, SPLC, and anybody else who is against the liberation of our people. And we just wanted to put the article out there so people know that this is not we're jumping on some Malik Zulu Shabazz bandwagon. Right? We recognize that brother's waking up and he's looking for some direction. And where he's been directed thus far is not in his best interest, because these people are pro-SPLC. They're pro-Anti-Defamation League. They're pro-United States democracy. They're pro-Inquisition. They're pro-everything having to do with our people staying deaf, dumb, and blind. And not being clear about, you know, what their freedom is and how they're supposed to acquire it. I don't know if you have anything else to add on to that, Mark.
You wrote that article in
07.
07? You was right there, Mark. You was right there.
Yeah.
It was just like, I was like, yo, he knew everything. It was just like, he just was missing one word. I was like, dang, man, he was there.
One word. One
He
word.
was right there, just looking me out. I was like, that's almost like a Moorish article right there.
Right? Now,
That's crazy.
No,
It's just bugging me out right now.
well, let's bug out some more, because there was a second article that we had to write, because they really started to infuse their Zionist, Jewish, whatever into the so-called blacks who were fighting for this liberation or whatever, right? So this is that article. The leaders of the black and Jewish communities have come together for the mass mental enslavement and demonic possession of melanated children. Due to lack of respect, self-education, criminalization, and other means of indoctrination and degradation by the Western school system, our melanated children are labeled at risk. The tactic of the Jewish and sellout black leadership is awarding scholarships and creating learning centers. We must stop here and really think about what is happening. There is a galactic alignment taking place, and we melanin beings are being bombarded by cosmic energy. We melanin beings have skin which acts as an outer brain and allows us to be able to interpret this cosmic energy and transform this energy into usable sources on the earth plane. These at-risk children are the saviors you have been waiting for all these years, and the demons know this. Through sellout black leadership, the members of the synagogue of Satan now have immediate access to the Christ. Using misinformation in their learning centers, the blooming Christ can now nosedive into the depths of unconsciousness from their God state. To show good faith, B'nai B'rith has offered $1,000 to sponsor a visit to Ontario Place by 20 Rexdale youth to see dancehall artist Sean Paul. Caravana executive Courtney Betty said, "Our relationship with B'nai B'rith is historic and extremely significant. They have agreed to help us mentor young people. We are hoping to bring empowerment to young people. First of all, by showing good faith, the demons are not serious about helping the quote-unquote black community. By serious about showing their good faith. What is their good faith? Their good faith is Judaism, which has helped them through their Holocaust and should help us by their involvement in hoping to empower our youth. They use their power to keep us downtrodden and live in ignorance. Ignorance is to ignore the facts. Why would they use Sean Paul? Sean Paul's heritage is Sephardi Jew, which are a subgroup of Jews originating in the Iberian Peninsula, usually defined in contrast with the Ashkenazi Jews. Also, he was a student of the Hillel Academy, a non-religious school founded by the local Jewish community in Jamaica's Blue Mountain Range. All this help is said to have come about because anti-Semitic comments made by black youth at a Queen's Park rally over Canada Customs refusing to allow prominent youth leader Malik Zulu Shabazz entry into Canada. The Jewish and sellout black leadership vowed to work together to ensure the betterment of both groups given their common history story as victims of discrimination. Secret relationship between blacks and Jews. Quote, "Indeed, no single group of people has faced blanket expulsion in so many places around the world as frequently as have the Jews. The pattern and the charges are familiar. Monopolization, usury, sharp practices, selling cheap goods, frequent bankruptcies, etc. All such claims seem to preface the expulsion orders and are vigorously denied both by those charged and by the Jewish writers of history. But this is not the only charge that is made against Jews. Jews have been conclusively linked to the greatest criminal endeavor ever undertaken against an entire race of people, a crime against humanity, the Black African Holocaust. They were participants in the entrapment and forcible exploitation of millions of black African citizens into the wretched and inhuman life of bondage for the financial benefit of Jews. Deep within the recess of the Jewish historical records is the irrefutable evidence that the most prominent of Jewish pilgrim fathers used kidnapped black Africans disproportionately more than any other ethnic or religious group in New World history, and participated in every aspect of the international slave trade. The immense wealth of Jews, as with most of the white colonial fathers, was acquired by the brutal subjugation of black Africans purely on the basis of skin color, a concept unfamiliar to Moses. Solomon Grazel states that Jews were among the most important slave dealers in European society. Lady Magnus writes in the Middle Ages, "The principal purchasers of slaves were found among the Jews. They seemed to be always and everywhere at hand to buy and to have the means equally ready to pay." Henry L. Feingold stated that the Jews, who were frequently found at the heart of commerce, could not have failed to contribute a proportionate share to the slave trade directly or indirectly. And 4 book references: Cohen George, The Jews in the Making of America, or George Cohen, Cohen, The Jews in the Making of America. Abraham Goodman, Jewish Rights in Colonial Times. Eric Hirschler, Jews from Germany in the United States. And Samuel and Edith Hurwitz, The New World Sets an Example for the Old, The Jews of Jamaica and Political Rights. Is it a coincidence that the Jews stopped Malik Zulu Shabazz, the new BYTA? Is it a coincidence that the Jews that stopped Malik Zulu Shabazz, the new BYTA, is boycotting Caravana? Now both Jews and Caravana committees are working together to help the black community? Knowing the lies they have been spread to keep the secret relationship between the blacks and Jews hidden, it is an abomination to ultimately disrespect our Creator, to side with the enemy that our Creator warned us about. Revelations 2:9. I know thy works, and tribulation, and poverty, but thou art rich, and I know the blasphemy of them which they say are Jews, and are not, but are the synagogue of Satan. Right, so during the 07, this was probably like spring going to summer, 07. This is what was, this was what was going on over here. This was yeah, we had heard. We were on the line. That was like during the time of Alim Bey and Brother Umar Shabazz that wrote We Are the Washita. That's the furthest we were at, but we were already at the part of the metaphysics and all that. We already connected with, you know, Black Dot and Hemet, you know, Rudra, Dr. Kaba, Queen Afua, all these people. We already connected with those people already. You know what I mean? Which is why you hear, like, you know, melanated people, and, you know, there wasn't too much even black talk in it, even though it was geared towards blacks or Africans or whatever. You know what I mean? Because, you know, with growth comes change. You know what I'm saying? So we were just going with the flow. But just wanted to put those out there, so people could know that, you know, we've been even as so-called blacks, we were against the system. We weren't with siding with the democracy. You're not trying to side with them. You're trying to get yourself from under their heel. You know, you're not trying to put anybody in there so they can then be the mayor and now we're gonna get something because we have somebody who looks like us in there. Hell no. That's against everything that our everybody who taught us, at least. You know, the Garveys, the El Hajjes. You know what I mean? You know, the Tony Martins, the Martin Delaney's, anybody who was for our people being free. You know, they taught us that, nah, it's not about being part of anything with those people. You know what I mean? But, you know, and again too, like, you know, he's a lawyer. And if he's talking about human rights and all that stuff and sovereignty or whatever, then you should probably stop listening to these clowns and get with Morris, who's been telling you people to study and that it's about sovereignty and nationhood and all that. You know what I mean? Opposed to listening to the newbies, you know, or the has-beens. Don't listen to them. You know, listen to the ones who, when you fact check what they say, there's information out there that you can say, oh snap, that's real? I didn't know that was real. I thought he was just saying something to sound good in the lecture. No? I don't know if you have any closing ones. I think we touched on everything we probably need to touch on.
Yeah, man. I mean, it's already done.
All right, more. Well, Islam for the build.
Because once again, there's no going back and forth, just a beating stick. Because I know that's what they always start to think.
Yeah.
All these guys, you start going back and forth, it's not going back and forth. It's just a beating stick.
All right. Islam to that. Peace and love, Morris.